Welcome back to update 3 on the Dwarves, this time with Thunderers and a Thane. In this video I'll be looking at the figures, discussing my ideas around their use on the table, and looking into the history and release of the sculpts. Thunderers first. 20 metal figures with full command, which I plan for smaller games at least to run in 2 blocks of 10 as they're based up here. As heavy infantry you could run them in ranks of 4 instead if you feel so inclined, but as they are here, I think they strike a decent balance between weight of fire and manoeuvrability, leaving them open to be used either as screens or as a more traditional gun line. It's perhaps strange for a dwarf player to be talking about manoeuvre, especially for a unit with handguns, given they have the ponderous special rule, meaning they suffer a -2 to hit modifier for moving and shooting instead of just -1. But with the rules using abstracted rather than true line of sight, and some players seeming to adopt an AOS or 40k style approach to terrain placement in games, having a longer, more unwieldy unit is something I anticipate finding rather annoying, with all those cases of partial cover you'll end up in. Although they might seem a bit costly as screens at 10 points a model, they can be useful in pinging off some wounds when receiving a charge, given they have the Dwarf crafted special rule, which negates the usual -1 to hit modifier when performing standard shoot charge reaction, or they could even hold a unit in place briefly on which to perform a flank charge with another unit. You'll notice the movement trays for them as well. I'm both delighted and surprised in equal measure at how well my review and tutorial of those GW trays seems to have performed. I'll put a link to that in the corner of the screen if you're interested. So, let's look at the sculpts themselves. Like the Ironbreakers I showed off last time, these are more of Colin Dixon's work, first released in January 2001, alongside the release of the original 6th edition army book for the Dwarfs. Again, like the Ironbreakers, there are a total of 7 sculpts, 3 of which are command figures, and the other 4 for the rank and flank. 2 are in the shooting pose. This one with a rather fetching hat and dragon head design on his handgun. And the other one helmeted with a sort of revolver type design on his handgun, which is a little strange. You'll notice both of these are quite similar in terms of their body, so they both have the tankard, the same bandolier around them, the powder case and dagger and so on. So very similar apart from the heads and gun designs, obviously. With painting these, I've tried to use a small palette of different browns and just varied between them the different highlight colours I'm applying and base coats to give some difference between the models but unifying the unit as a whole. The other 2 sculpts are intended for the second line of your shooting units. These ones holding the guns at the ready pose instead. One helmeted, one bald. Again, very similar in terms of the bodies. These are both in chainmail and have again the same sort of bandolier design on them, except the bald one has his helmet at the rear. Mostly the guns are the points of difference between these sculpts and the faces again. The musician, which is very similar, you may notice, to the one of the Ironbreaker, in almost exactly the same pose and a very similar kind of boar, or not sure what this is, maybe dragon, snake, something, shaped horn on him. He's got his handgun holstered at the rear. The standard bearer, there's a few other models in the range which have this kind of face design for their standards, who's got a rather more fancy tankard on his side. I really like the little boar sculpted on his head here. And the champion, equipped with a brace of pistols. This range really demonstrates an important quality of Games Workshop sculpting at this time, I feel, which is the amount of character that's in the models without them becoming over-detailed. There's just enough things on their belts without every inch of their surface being covered with too many fine little trinkets and so on, as I think some people feel with AOS ones they are. The other model I've painted up this month is this fantastic sculpt. I'm running it as a thane in small games, but it was originally released as a dwarf lord with great weapon in January 2006, 5 years to the month after the Thunderers, for the release of the so-called 6.5 edition army book. As befits the character, I spent a bit longer painting this model, and I'm really delighted with how it's come out. Many of the techniques used here are the same as those which I used in my Ironbreakers, for which I have a fairly in-depth tutorial on the channel already, but the skin's obviously something that those models don't include, So I'll be releasing a separate video in the next few days looking at how I approach that. So make sure to subscribe if that's something you're interested in seeing. This is the only model from the 6.5 range that I have in the collection to date, but it's one I really love. The sculptor, Felix Paniagua, ended up leaving Games Workshop in late 2005, having sculpted no fewer than 5 different dwarf lords for the range refresh. Those like me who really love his style of sculpting may be interested to know he later created his own miniatures company back in Spain, Avatars of War, whose dwarf range includes regiments of warriors, rangers, hammerers, dubbed Kingsguard, slayers, or seekers, and 16, yes, 16 characters, including engineers, runesmiths, thanes, and named slayers. I'll leave the link to his site in the description for you to check out. Whatever you may think of the 6.5 edition plastic kits, there are some gems within the individual characters that really hark back to the style of the earlier 6th edition range, the greatest continuity being in those sculpted by Ali Morrison, of course, like the runesmiths. So this is where I'm up to so far. About 700 points in total across 41 figures. This week I got to field all of these models in a Learn to Play event at my local Warhammer store, which was a lovely experience and I think really contradicted a lot of the fears or preconceptions some sectors of the community had about how us fantasy players would be received and catered to. I'll be releasing a discussion video about that as well fairly soon, with thoughts on rules and community building in the early days of the old world. Lastly, I just want to say a huge thank you for all the support this channel's received so far. Reaching 100 subscribers and over 5,000 views already is something I never expected to hit so quickly on the channel. For anyone out there who's on the fence about creating and releasing your own content, just give it a go. It's been such a rewarding experience so far. Good luck with all your hobbying, and until next time.